Good morning, students. Let's see what is Django framework and how it works with Python. Very firstly, what is Django framework? So Django framework is a free and open source web application framework which offers fast and effective dynamic website development. Firstly, what is a framework? A web framework is a code library that makes web development faster and easier by providing common patterns for building reliable, scalable, and maintainable web applications. The Django framework is as play a front end and back end as well as a database. To understand it more clearly, so let's understand the difference between library and framework. Library called by a code and code called by a framework. Why Django framework used? It's a loosely coupled, less code, not repeated, fast development and consistent design. And excellent documentation and high scalability used by top MNC companies such as Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, Mozilla, Pinterest, and etc. Easiest framework to learn rapid development batteries fully included, and it's a Django is a Python as a huge library used by Python, huge library and features such as a web scraping, machine learning, image processing, scientific computing, etc. The Django architecture is based on Mvt. Mvt is nothing as a modern view template architecture, the software design pattern for developing a web application. The Mvt in model, the first letter M is depends, helps to handle database. It is data access layer which handles the data. The template is a presentation layer which handles user interface part completely. The view is used to execute the business logic and interact with the model to carry data and renders the template. The flow of control in model view template, the user sends a request for a resource. The Django checks the availability of URL, and if URLs map the view called model and template. Template is the a front end which is the user can deal with like HTML and CSS, and model is nothing, it's a database. Now, our first step to create a virtual environment. The virtual environment is an environment which is used by Django to execute an application. It is recommended to create and execute Django application in separate window. To install virtual environment before installing Django, virtual environment creates isolated environment to isolate your Python files on pre-project basis. It ensures that any changes created in your website won't have an effect to alternative website you are developing. The attention grabbing of it that you just will produce virtual environment with completely different Python versions. So instead the open command prompt your entire following and type the entire following command. A set virtual environment. Setting up the virtual environment will allow you edit the dependency which generally system wouldn't allow. Follow the steps to set up a virtual environment. Create a virtual environment by giving this command in CMD and change the directory the virtual env site by this command to go to script directory. So inside the env site and activate the virtual environment. Now we will create a Django project, namely our first project. Open Visual Studio Code or any other source code editor. Click Terminal or Console. Write a code to start a Django project. Firstly, the command is to start up your project, Django admin start project, your project name. I mention my project name as a first project. Then, now I have to check whether the Django server is running or not by the following command python manage.py run server. After this command, you will get the URL and take that URL, copy that URL and paste it into Google Chrome or Firefox. After you paste the URL, if you see the screen, your Django server is running. So Django project structure, after you create the project, you will slightly display that the options like manage.py, initiate.py, settings.py, urls.py and wsgi.py. Manage.py, a shortcut to use the Django admin command line utility, is used to the run management command related to your project. We will use it for run the development server, run test, create migration and much more, etc. Initiate is a empty file that indicates this folder is the Python package. Settings is the contains all the project configurations. URLs, with the help of URL, if you want to show something in URL, you have to map it first. And WSGI, this file simply gateway interface used for deployment. We have nothing to do with it. After creating a project, let's create a Django app. I declare my app as a first app by following code as python manage.py start app first app. Let's understanding the app. You also have a app in app folder. You have something options like migrations, admin.py, apps.py, models.py and test.py, views.py. In migration, to keep track of your changes done in models. So models is nothing, the database. So keep the database and models.py updated. Admin, the configuration file for built-in Django app called Django admin. In apps.py, configuration the file current app and models, as usual I say that the models are translated automatically by the Django into database tables. Test is used to write the unit test for the app and views is the file where we handle the request and response for our web applications. Now that we create our first step under the project library, right, configure our first project, use it, open settings in settings.py with idle and search the installed app variables and declare your first app in that. In the application definition, you have to see the installed apps. Already there are many other like admin, authentication, content type, session, messages and static files. You have to include your first app in that as your first app name. Now create any HTML file which you want to show with Django and place it under the new folder called as a template under the folder application. Now we will add this file to views.py so that we can leave it with Django server. Now write the code view file to call HTML using the render option. Render is a special Django helper function that creates a shortcut for communicating with a web browser. See, settings are used in a URL. Now open your url.py files and do the following changes to link the file. Write an import statement to include your views from book. In this example, the application name is book and here we are including a name, a web page to be executed with server and function to called. So we are ready to run the web page.html with Django server. As usual, I told that how to execute the Django framework by using python manage.py run server. You will get the URL and take that URL and paste it on a Chrome or Firefox. You will run the execution, a successful web page. So I done for registration form. Let's see the video. So started from Django admin start project as an introduction. I set my run server. In models, I will insert the database, what I done in my web page, the first name, last name, email, password, and retype password. I will done several options in following steps. In database, it's inbuilt database we have in Django. It's a SQLite. If you want to connect various database like Postgres SQL or MySQL or MongoDB, you will have to go to settings and database. You have to change your engine name and name user password. You have to take a password, or it's not necessary to keep your password. Inbuiltly, the database is run in SQLite 3 in Django framework. The Django is a both front-end and back-end as well as database. It's a fully packaged web framework. So Python. Finally, I execute the program. I get my URL here. I paste it. So I done a registration form by using a Django framework in Python. So I denoted a first name, last name, email address, password, and retype the password and the submit button. This is the very first application in Django framework. Thank you.